And we're live. This is the Street Epistemology Community Livestream Hangout number 4, if my count serves me correctly. Sorry for the delay. Had some domestic troubles on my end with the children. They had other plans other than me starting the live stream on time, so mea culpa there. We've got a few guests with us on. We got Reed Nicewonder from the Cordial Curiosity channel.
Hello, what's up?
And we've also got Raul Fresco, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that.
Oh, that's fine. Hello, guys.
And Raul is here today to show us an interesting belief map app that can, well, I'll let him describe it later because I probably won't do it justice. And we also have CJ with us. Say hello, CJ.
Hello, CJ.
I walked right into that one. All right, and I've got the pop-out chat going so I can try to multitask and answer questions or address comments that people have in the chat. All right, so thank you all for joining. Today for the Community Hangout, I didn't really have much of a topic in mind. I did want to, Raul and I had been messaging each other, private messaging each other on Facebook, so I did want him to join and go over that belief map app. So I guess that's the topic if you wanted to use that term. But also, I thought maybe today, so I know over the last few community live streams, we didn't really do much SE role play or anything like that. So I figured we might do SE or SC role play on each other after Raul shows us that app.
Okay.
Unless Reed or Raul or CJ, you had anything you wanted to bring up and discuss before I let Raul take it away with the belief map.
No,
Okay.
I don't have anything. Just nothing particular. I'm just joining, hoping to learn something.
Yeah, same.
All right, Raul. Well, I'll go ahead and hand the floor over to, or the virtual talking stick over to you, and let you take it away.
All right. So yes, I wanted to talk about this application that I've been working on for a while. My main point is, okay, so I love street epistemology. I think it's a very good tool. I wish people would use that on me, and I think the world will be. We will have much better conversations if we were all going to use this tool. So my next question is, okay, how do I get everybody to learn very quickly street epistemology? Because yes, so you can do what I did, which is to watch lots and lots of videos from Anthony, which is you really have to have a lot of will and be a real enthusiast to do all that, because in each video you learn something new, but it takes a long time as well, right? And for example, if you want to learn something similar, let's think about any turn-based thing that you want to do. For example, when you're think about playing cards, or it's something similar, right? You have two people and they are really, it's a turn-based thing where the other person does something and then you reply, and whatever you do, the outcome depends on what you say. So if you are just looking at people doing that, you miss many things, right? You really need a way to learn at your own pace. You want to slow down things. You need to break down the conversation and have something different than a tool than watching videos, because it's very slow. So so what happens with the street epistemology is that, well, first you need to be able to come up quickly with a question. Many times, it's not easy because you're talking with someone and you have all these things going on in your head, and if you had a way to rehearse or to practice offline street epistemology, that would be much better, right? That's what politicians do when they go to a debate. They prepare a little bit. So can we have a similar tool where we can practice, where we can, if something goes wrong, we can go back and say, okay, I don't want to say this, I want to say this other thing, and let's see what happens. And for that, I built a website where what you can do is, think of it as if you're trying to learn how to play chess, the best way is to learn with a machine, right? Every time you make a mistake, you go back and you can try different things and see what's the outcome of each move, and that way you learn. At least that's how I learned, and it was very good, and you can use it anytime. And so I thought, okay, how about if I could clone Anthony's into an application where he would be asking you questions, and then you have to answer, right? And depending on what you answer, so you're going to have a different question that's going to be appropriate to that answer, right? If we had such a tool that we had it in our pocket, which is what I'm going to show, I'm going to show this tool. So what are the advantages of having this tool, right? So the first one is that you have a reference at any time, right? I could just go and think about some conversation I had with someone, and it could go through this app. And if I remember all the answers I was given, or I can imagine what the person answered, I could use this application to see what would be the best question to ask when you hear a particular claim. In fact, that's something that we see very often in the Facebook group, right? Many people, hey, I came to this, so the interlocutor told me this, made this claim. What's the best way to answer that, right? So this tool is supposed to solve that problem, and it's something that you can use as a reference, that you can explore. You can look at, okay, these are all the claims, and this is how I can reply to them. So what I can do, I think it's better if I do a quick demo, and I'm going to share my screen, and let's see if there's a way to switch the screen sharing so everybody can see what the app looks like and what's going on. So, okay, can you all see the screen that says Belief Explorer?
I can manually click on it here in the Hangout window, but I don't know if it goes out to YouTube that way. Tim, if you click on it?
I'm going to try mute.
I know it gives me the option to do screen share in the left side. I could pull up the app or the website and do it from my end. I was trying to see if it would let me make Raul like a presenter or something.
If Raul just uses the mic from his laptop, that might work. It'll switch over.
Yeah, so far I'm just seeing the person who's speaking.
Yeah, Raul, unmute your laptop, and then it should switch over. Yeah, go to the Hangout window on your laptop and unmute yourself. That should work. Yeah, click the Hangout tab, the one with the red circle. I wonder if you can hear us. Hello, Raul.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now. Do you know how to unmute yourself on your laptop?
Yeah, that's what I thought I had done, but
well, here I'll try to screen share it from my laptop and see if.
I think he's going to try to do a demo and do some stuff on his end. If he can.
Oh, okay.
Like, Raul,
I'll do that then.
If Hangouts tab on your laptop.
Well, yeah, that's what I did, and my laptop says that I am talking through my laptop and my phone, which is what I'm using here. That's
yeah, right now you're at the Belief. We see your Belief Explorer tab. Click on the Google Hangouts tab with the red circle. Yeah, now unmute yourself. Click that unmute.
Oh, I see. Sorry, there I go.
I'm hearing feedback. Might have to.
Yeah, because there are two mics on. Close one mic.
So now you can talk on your laptop, and we're good. Okay.
Okay.
I'll go back to Belief Explorer. And make sure you mute yourself.
Let me.
And turn down the volume on your phone as well.
Okay.
Or just leave your phone. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That should work.
All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So can you see the website?
Yes. Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay. Is it the size of the text is decent and you can read it clearly and.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Excellent.
Go ahead.
So Well, the first thing, so this is just a very simple app, right? You open it and it asks you a question, right? Which is in this case, it's supposed to tease you a little bit, so you want to continue answering questions, right? And it's telling you, okay, so just bear in mind that reflecting on deeply held beliefs, it's not suitable for sensitive people. Are you ready for it? And then what you say, well, bring it on, just and then it guides you through the usual process of, okay, pick a deeply held belief, something that clearly defines who you are and the decisions you make. We make this a little bit bigger. And since the application is still a work in progress, so just choose religion or karma, because those are the topics this application understands. So you say got it, and you go to the next step. And it starts with the questions that you will ask to someone that you are trying to use a street epistemology on. And the first question is, at least in the process I decided to follow, is to understand what the other person really understands by truth, right? So whether it is important for the person to believe in things that are true, because if we realize that at the beginning, there's no point at continuing the conversation, or maybe there's something else we can do. So then you have two choices, though. So the person can say, okay, yes, or they can say no, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. So if we say, let's say we want to say yes, I don't mind as long as it doesn't hurt anyone, right? Let's imagine this person replies that. So the next question could be, okay, will it be okay for you to believe in things? Will it be okay for you to believe that Santa exists for all your life, right? And then the other person has to justify. So, well, and let's say the person says no, well, then you will click in, I'm afraid not. Then it comes with the next question. So, is it important that others believe in things that are true? And, well, again, you can say yes or no. Let's say that now we can say yes. Let's see what the next question is. And, well, at this point, we read this message that says, okay, so we have established that you appreciate truth and you want to believe in things that are true. And you agree with that. And it continues the conversation. So, and the first question that's asking, once that we all agree that we want to believe in true things, is like, okay, are you 100% sure that your belief is true? I'm asking this question because it's important before going to the scale one, at least in this case. And if you say, well, I'm pretty confident, but I have my doubts, you can say, okay, so then in a scale, what would be your confidence level of that belief? Yeah. Think about a number. Again, that tells you, okay, what will make you move up on that scale? So I guess you guys are getting the idea of what's happening here. So I don't think we have to go through a full, unless you want it. Yeah.
I'm seeing the pattern here. Yeah, you're basically taking the general script, I guess, from Anthony and putting it on a website form. That's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. And I was first wondering how this differed from like the Atheos app. But it seems
is the Atheos app doing this? Because when I saw it, I thought it was doing something different. It was just
doing something different. Yeah,
with different scenarios.
Yeah, it's flipped now. Like this is for the believers to use, and Atheos is for like the SE people to use to practice SE. So this is kind of like just taking the SE person out of it and just automating it in a sense.
Well, what I will say is that the Atheos app, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what it does is to present you with different scenarios, and they don't have to be connected with each other, and ask you, okay, what will you do here, right? What would you ask?
True. Yeah, but I think what Reed was saying, the main difference is that Atheos mimics an interlocutor. Sorry, mimics
the SEer.
Yeah. It basically trains the street epistemologist, and here the app is the street epistemologist, and the user is actually the interlocutor.
Yeah, Atheos has like interlocutor robots, and this is having the SEer robot.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then it might be that way. So the thing is, what I wanted to have in my pocket is what would Anthony say in the situation, right? And this is what this tool solves, right? So I find this claim, how do I reply to it? And also, how do I continue, right? Because after that question, right, they're going to tell me another claim. So maybe I have it in my app. If I don't have it, there's, by the way, a fantastic comment section where you can go down here and you can keep it always constructive. You can always suggest your ideas. You can feel free to disagree. And I'm hoping that with the help of everyone, so we can make this tool stronger, better, yeah, to help everyone.
Okay, so that's a little different now. So this is still a training tool for SE people. It's something that you might have like as you're talking with someone to use as like a reference, or just in your free time you just practice this.
Yeah, so there are many ways in which I will use this app, right? Because I don't really, well, I wouldn't want to use it in front of someone. It's like you are telling a joke to someone and you don't want to be, well, you can be reading it, but it's not going to be the same as if you deliver the joke yourself, right? It's going to be different. But it's something I will use as a reference myself. For example, I would like to explore, okay, what if I had, I could use it as a game, right? For example, in this situation, imagine that your interlocutor replies with the first claim. What will I say, right? And I can think of a few questions. Okay, I will say this, I will say that. And then, okay, let's figure out what, because most of these questions were taken from Anthony Magnabosco's videos. I can say, okay, what did Anthony say? I can go, I click on it, and I see what Anthony said in that situation, right? If I consider true for me that your car is now mine, will it be right? So it's a way to challenge yourself at home. So to do some offline street epistemology with a very smart person, right? That knows the best questions for every claim. Yes, I will use it as a reference, or when I'm doing street epistemology online with somebody, and I'm like, oh, I need to cheat a little bit and try to see, okay, what's the best answer for this claim? Make sense?
Yeah, and I just thought of something that might be really cool is if you're getting these questions and answers literally from videos, and these are pretty much transcriptions almost, it would be cool to have like a link next to the answer option to like where you found that answer. So like maybe next to the no, just believing is not enough, next to that could be like a link to the actual YouTube video we found that answer, or something very similar to that answer for them people to like.
Yeah, and you can even link to like a specific time index in that YouTube clip, so it takes them right to the car example. I know one time in one of Anthony's videos, he was talking about if I believed that your cell phone was mine, and you just reached out and grabbed the cell phone, would that make it true? So maybe you could link to that if that happens at like 15 minutes into the video. I know on YouTube you can actually share a link at a specific time index, so that'd be an interesting idea. I'd also love to see how I'd love to see the Ferrari, the infamous Ferrari example, kind of built into this as well, because I think that's also something like some thought experiment like that would also be helpful in exploring not just whether something's true for me is also true for you, but also that the Ferrari or Lamborghini example also helps to kind of examine how does your interlocutor view degrees of evidence. You know, would they be as willing to accept another extraordinary claim that may not have anything to do with the belief in question, but would they have the same standard of evidence? But I think this is good so far. I mean, I'm glad you're opening yourself to feedback. And if anybody watching this, I put the link in the YouTube chat. If anybody wants to go try it, feel free. I mean, be civil in the feedback form, but I know Raul was always welcoming feedback to improve, because this is a work in progress. But it's interesting to have a tool like this, because I think Reed hit it on the head earlier. This is, I mean, to me, this seems like the Atheos app in reverse. Like, this is something someone who wanted to undergo SE, an automated SE of sorts, just, even though it's not really a chatbot, but it's more of like almost like a choose your own adventure story where you'd flip to a certain page.
Yeah, and
indeed.
And I can see how complex this can get very quickly.
Yeah.
So
well, I can show you how complex this can get. In fact, so the most difficult part of coming up with such an application was not to, because okay, you can see the text, it's very simple. The difficult part I'm going to show you right now is how do you organize all this information in a way that you can understand it and handle it and create like a narrative, right? And for that, I created this app. Oops. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you? I don't know if you can. Oops. Can I zoom in?
Wow.
I should be able to. Okay, this is all what's happening in the conversation, right? And so every box like this, that's a question, right? And then you can go. This is the question that happens at the beginning. Okay, and then you can go this way or you can go that way. That's why I call it street epistemology map, right? Because in the end, you could think that every question is like a place in a map, and then you are moving from one question to another one, and depending on the path that you decide the path in which you can go, and depending on the path, obviously you're going to be asked some questions or some others. So it's quite complex to create all that. And unless you have an editor like this, it is rather difficult to organize all the questions and all the answers. So this was really the secret sauce to what we were seeing.
When I was starting out, I was thinking of doing something like this with like very much limited software, and I pretty much gave up immediately because I figured out how complex it would be. But this is very cool. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad you saw that similar to the choose your own adventure, because it's really that. And I was wondering before starting, before I worked on this, I was thinking, okay, how do they do it? I can use the same tools they are using. And of course, they didn't have a computer, and they had I saw some pictures. They have a huge wall with something like this, and they cannot move things like myself, right? I can just edit this and see. I can just move things around and make a space for new boxes and add lines or whatever. But they didn't have that. They had just a paper. So I can imagine it was quite a pain. And if they had this, they will, it's more amazing because you can have more. You can make dialogues richer, which is what we need for street epistemology. So, in fact, my hope is that. So the way I hope this will unfold is that I'm hoping to get feedback in the comment section. Then I will take that feedback and I will use this editor to add new questions, to modify them, and if someone gets really excited about this and says, hey, I've been doing street epistemology and I would like to contribute with I would like to help to grow this graph, and anyone is welcome to participate, and I will be very happy. And the more people, the stronger this tool will become. And as for a way to use this, I was thinking, okay, I understand. For example, if I find a tool like this that explores some belief that I have, right, I would use it with myself, right? Probably because I'm quite open to change my mind, or I want to have my belief challenged. Whether there will be some believers that will be happy to use this just to have a better understanding of why do they believe in things, and probably there are some that will be happy to use it. So
very cool.
I have a question. Are all the paths between questions, are they one way, or can an answer to a question basically lead back to a previous question?
Yes, in fact, that's what happens. So now I can zoom in. So if I zoom in, so we can see that.
So that triangle, for example. I mean, I see the arrows now. So those are actually one way.
Yeah.
So so I was basically wondering if there's any risk or possibility of somebody getting in a loop and getting the same question.
Is there like an undo button for an answer, like change your mind about it or something?
Well, that was actually what I was thinking about. I was thinking about if a certain response to a question basically moves you back up the tree of questions, could that become a loop where a person basically gets stuck because they give the same answers and it doesn't have like a resolution in the end?
Well, the thing is, I've been very careful with the questions, and I'm hoping you don't get into a loop. And if you get into a loop, which is something that happens very often in conversations, right, you end up with this circular reasoning. If you end up in a loop and you cannot go out, it's because there's some contradiction, and you probably there's some question that you are not really understanding or something. So
a next level version of this would be maybe that if a loop presents itself, that there's like an alternate question, because that's what a street epistemologist would do. If we notice a loop, then we try to break out of it, and that in this case would fall on the SE map itself, which of course I'm assuming would be a lot of work to do.
No, I don't think it's a lot of work. I thought about it, but well, when you are developing an application, you have to first try to get out there the features that matter the most to the people, and then let's see if people get excited and they want to. I want to add my own questions to this app, and if it catches up. So the next step, I have lots of features that I would like to implement, and one of that features is so detect when a person gets stuck in a loop, and say, hey, try to somehow break that up. And you asked me another question. You were saying if everything is in one direction. Well, I think there are examples where you can go in both directions, right? For example, well, this one, right? So what makes you think your belief is true, right? And if you answer, we look at this, say, well, I cannot find the reason in this list, so it's going to tell you, sorry about that. Can you see the mouse cursor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, excellent. So you can see where I'm pointing, and it will tell you, okay, sorry, you don't see the belief in this list. So could you just find another reason why you believe? And it will tell you, and you can choose from, say, okay, sure, let me try, and you go back again to the same question, and you try to use another reason, and you explore that.
I understand. There, the question itself actually points towards. Oh, move back up a bit again. The question you were just pointing to.
Zoom in,
because I think actually. Shouldn't the question be? Could you find any other belief in the list instead of reason?
Oh yeah, should be.
Yeah, so that's just one typo. But right there, then the question itself actually asks the user to pick a different answer. So they're basically encouraged to go with another answer and get out of the loop. So that's fine.
And I'm looking at that center question there, and what makes you think your belief is true? And I would probably rephrase it to, and what gives you confidence that your belief is true might be a better phrasing for that. Yeah,
I see. So the reason why I'm saying that is because that's coming from here. Because once you agree that you want to believe in things that are true and that you value evidence, right? Because at some point, so it's very interesting. It tells you where can I see that? Well, it's asking. Let me see. It tells you what would make you move up on your scale, right? And two of those answers are, I would accept evidence, right? And another one is, no, I don't need any evidence. If it's true for me, that's what really matters. But when you reach to that question, is because you have agreed that you will accept evidence to go up or down in your scale. And when you get there, at that point, that means that you value evidence and asks you, okay, what's the evidence you have? And then is when it asks you what makes you, I see what you're saying. Okay, no, that's very interesting. That's in fact that's the kind of conversations I wanted to have with people that, or the kind of comments I would like to see in the comment section. So,
hey Raul, while we have a pause here, Reese in the YouTube live chat is asking, he's saying he's interested, or it might be a she, I apologize for assuming gender there. Reese is asking, I'm interested to see what the final or last dialogue box says. Is there any way we could show that? Or does that depend?
One. Well, the thing is there's no final dialog box, because you end up, so let's see, a final dialog box will be
probably
if you happen to follow this path, right, which is asking you, so not that one because it's very boring, but these ones, those leaves over there hanging from this graph are the final boxes. For example, in this case, let's see where it's coming from. Because if someone with a different belief told us that this is coming from a branch where you are discussing, where the person is saying that they believe, they hold that belief because it makes me feel good. And then in this question, you're asking them, okay, if someone with a different belief told us that they are more comfortable, would it make their belief true? And obviously they're going to say no. Well, they can say many things, but if they say no, then is when you end the conversation saying, okay, if it's not, this is the main reason why you believe, and this wouldn't be reliable for another person. Why is it reliable for you? And you leave the person with that thing to reflect on.
Okay, so the final dialogue essentially depends on which path in the dialogue tree they're taking. So there's not a fixed one. Okay.
Right. So things, and so something that helped me this tool to a lot, it's to learn about, for example, when I watch all the Anthony videos, they all cover different areas of this graph, right? But when I was putting all those questions and these answers in the graph, I realized that there were some areas that were not explored, and I was like, I need a very good question for this one, because I couldn't find it in Anthony's videos, right? So this helped me to face situations that I had never seen before, and I had to come up myself with questions and examples for those claims. And it'd be great if, I don't know, given that these are claims that we have never seen before, at least in Anthony's videos, it'd be great to take one of them, or I don't know, for people that are interested into broadening street epistemology and coming up with good questions to, come here, pick up a claim for which we don't have any question, and try to propose a question. Did that make sense? I think I didn't explain it very well.
Yeah, you found some areas that could use some exploration. Yeah.
Yes. And anyone's welcome anyone help is welcome to propose questions, and that we can comment in the comment sections.
Sure.
So that's it. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Raul, for going through that with us, and I put the link to this in the YouTube chat earlier, but I'll go ahead and put it back in there again, and I may once the video is actually uploaded to YouTube, I'll probably add it into the description as well. So I appreciate you going through that with us, Raul. I'll go ahead and unpin you so you're not stuck always presenting here.
Okay, sounds good.
Very nice.
Okay, so as far as the got some inception going there. From my point of view, I see 3 of me. Unless somebody put something interesting in my coffee. Okay, I wonder why it's still... Oh, you're still screen sharing. There you go, Rob.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop that. Okay, now... Okay.
So as far as the rest of the live stream here, I figure we just kind of maybe open it up for some SE roleplay, or if anybody on the live stream or in the YouTube comments had a topic they would like to discuss. It's pretty open. I didn't really want to lock us into a topic beforehand.
I see we have a guest joined as well.
Well, I have a question.
What's up, Darth?
Hey, DD.
Yeah, my question is, do you guys agree with Peter Boghossian's position that we should use the power of the state to cripple faith-based institutions, and that people who believe in God should be treated as mentally ill and be classified as mentally ill and deranged under the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatry? Do you guys agree with that?
So he's saying, Boghossian, I think he wants to be able to study SE conversations, and there are some issues with some ethics review boards in the type of university environments where Boghossian wants to study these types of conversations. And I think the ethics review boards get their
oh no, that's not what he wants to do. In the back of his book, he has containment protocols. Did you read that?
Mm-hmm.
He considers faith a virus, a mental illness, and that anyone who believes in God or has similar religious beliefs should be classified as mentally ill, and it should be treated as a public health crisis. This is what he specifically states in the containment protocols at the end of a manual for treating atheists. Do you guys agree that the state should go after faith-based organizations and financially cripple them, as Boghossian does in the book?
I don't know where he's saying the state should go after anybody.
Or he says it. Go to the containment protocols at the end of the book. You want me to read it to you?
Sure.
All right. Give me a second here.
And just to interject, I'm not sure why the Hangouts has stopped auto switching camera focus. So if I'm disengaged, it's because I'm having to manually switch it because I stopped Raul's presentation or unlocked it.
Tim, click on Raul's box.
Well,
there should be a white border in your screen if you click on it. And then
it is switching for me, by the way. It looks normal for me.
Click it. Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so in Chapter 9 of Containment Protocols, he says faith is an unclassified cognitive illness. Then I'll scroll down a few paragraphs. And in Containment Protocol number 8, treat faith as a public health crisis. Okay. Then he says there's an urgent need for large-scale interventions in educational systems, houses of worship, and other institutions. So he wants the American Psychiatric Association to classify belief in the existence of God as a mental illness and a form of mental derangement, and that there should be increasing monies being spent to research and to disabuse the people of this mental illness. So that's number 8. And then he says, I'm advocating conceptualizing the faith problem from a public health perspective and designing interventions based upon that model. Number 9, financially cripple purveyors of faulty epistemologies. A key containment protocol is to financially cripple any institution that propagates, quote, faulty epistemology. Well, that's referring to religious institutions. And then he goes on about how we should use the tax code to go after religious organizations. And then he says both of these measures would deal a serious financial blow to the religious institutions and restrict their ability to proselytize. And then he goes on, he says in number 11, remove the religious exemption for delusion from the DSM. He says it's crucial that the religious exemption for delusion be removed from the DSM. He goes on, removing that exemption classifies a phenomenon as an officially recognized psychiatric disorder and legitimizes research designed to cure that. Okay? And he says at the very end of the containment protocols, he says, in the long term, once these treatments in this body of research is refined, results could be then used to inform public health policies, meaning the state, designed to contain and ultimately eradicate faith. So he wants to use the power of the state to eradicate faith. You guys agree with Peter Boghossian on that?
I think there's some good arguments to support that type of position. I don't think I view religious beliefs in that way. I have other means of explaining that, but I love how Boghossian is so frank about that and pretty much leaves no stone unturned and keeps his beliefs really out there for people to examine and talk about, just like this. So, that's Boghossian's opinion. He gives reasons for it, and people can accept it or not.
Well, it's not just his opinion. He's advocating people who follow street epistemology follow these containment protocols.
Yeah, it's a good thing Boghossian's not like the Pope of street epistemology, and that we have to, follow his every word. We are individuals with our own beliefs and
so you don't agree with him, then, is that right?
I see faith as a poor epistemology for believing really anything.
So is believing in God a mental illness?
No, not anymore.
Well, that's what Boghossian says. In fact, you can see it in his lectures where he's actively working with another researcher to lobby the American Psychiatric Association to have that change in the next revision of the DSM. He's actually trying to get everyone in the United States classified as mentally ill if they say they believe that there's an eternal creator.
Can I ask a question for clarification to Darth? Thanks. It seems that Peter Boghossian here is targeting faith. What do you think Peter Boghossian means by the word faith in this context?
Oh, the belief in any supernatural concepts, and that would encompass a belief in a creator God. He makes that abundantly clear in the book. I have the book.
So if you were to read a different definition given by Boghossian for the word faith, would that cause you to revise your position, or at least revisit your position?
Well, I'm familiar with his completely non-standard definition of faith, but what I'm referring to here is his containment protocols that I just read to you, and he's defining that he wants to go after the faith-based institutions and actual people, individual people who are of faith. He wants to use the power of the state insofar as it would be deemed a public health crisis, and to treat it as though it was institutionalized racism. So he's advocating the use of the power of the state and I will quote him, to eradicate faith.
So
if I may answer, actually might be just one more thing, if you thanks, Roel. The reason I'm asking this, this might be an interesting perspective for you. I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm Dutch, and Dutch is my first language. In the Dutch language, we only have one word for both faith and belief. There's no distinction in our language between those two, and that actually makes it quite difficult in our language sometimes to talk about this, because sometimes a person uses that Dutch word and means a belief, and another time they use that word and they mean faith. English has it a bit easier, but still faith is not a word with only one meaning. And I think I've heard Peter Boghossian give a different definition for faith, one I have not heard from you in this context yet. So I think that's
I'm referring to how he's
going on here.
He's categorizing people of faith. He's categorizing people who believe in God. He first concludes that they have the epistemology, and that their faith, their belief that there is a creator God that accounts for all that exists, that they are deluded, that they're suffering from a mental illness. He said he refers to it as a virus.
Yeah. So you think that Peter Boghossian is here equating faith to belief in God? Do I understand you correctly?
Well, he would have when he defines faith in the beginning of the Manual for Creating Atheists, he defines faith a bit more broad. But at containment protocols, he's referring to people who have belief in God and other so-called faith-based, as he defines the word, beliefs. But I'm just simply pointing out that well, his definition of faith, he has his own proprietary definition that faith is believing in something, pretending to believe in something that you, I'm going to paraphrase it here. Yeah, that you don't know is true.
Yeah. So can I give a quick answer? Because I think we have to be, at least in my case, I want to be very clear about this. So what I like about the street epistemology is that it's not non-confrontational. And I think that willing to, how did you say that? So the government should like...
yeah, at the end of the book, he has a section.
So then I disagree with that. I think we should. I think whatever we do have to be non-confrontational. So I disagree.
Yeah, and Darth
really saying that I disagree.
Yeah, I think it's fair to think that if us fans of street epistemology on a street epistemology community live stream or like really like street epistemology should pretty much agree with everything Boghossian says, and especially from his book where street epistemology comes from. But that is the very last part of the chapter, and it really has nothing to do with the actual method of street epistemology. And a fair proportion of people, I don't even know about people's views about these ideas. So like we're not forced to believe this or agree with it if we like the street epistemology method. Is that okay to say?
Well, sure. I'm just asking if you guys agree with his extreme radical views about using the power of the state to eradicate faith.
I agree with his goals, maybe not his methods.
Well, you believe in his goals to eradicate faith. So, I mean, then that means that you would have to chuck your worldview as well, because your worldview begins with faith as well. You believe things for which you don't have evidence for. Right? You want to, he says that Boghossian says faith is believing in things for which you don't have evidence. Well, what's the evidence that all beliefs require faith? Obviously, Peter Boghossian has beliefs in things like laws of nature. Well, he has to have faith for that.
I wouldn't think he would agree with that.
Oh, he most certainly would have to, because you see, you can't see the laws of nature. And you see, attempting to appeal to justify them by sense perception would be presupposing that they exist. So he certainly has beliefs about the uniformity of nature. He has beliefs that there are laws of logic. You can't see the laws of logic. So he'd have to have faith that they exist, because certainly he couldn't have evidence for it, right?
We use these descriptions of nature, like the laws of nature, as like temporary, provisional things that we think nature has, and we just use them to help build models to help make predictions. So we could be wrong about those things.
Right, but are you against? Is faith believing in something for which you don't have evidence?
Am I against that?
No, I said, is faith, according to Boghossian, and do you agree that faith is believing in something for which you don't have evidence?
I think that's a popular usage. Yeah, that's a popular usage.
Okay, if I could interrupt for just a moment. Okay, before you two go on, I really don't want this to become the...
You want to set a timer?
Yeah, I really want to set a timer, because I don't want to spend the rest of the Hangout discussing this. So I've got, well, I guess it doesn't matter what time I have. I'm going to go ahead and start a 10-minute timer. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, so Boghossian says faith is a faulty epistemology because faith is believing in something that you don't have evidence for. Well, he believes in laws of nature. Now, how would you justify that there are laws of nature? You certainly couldn't do it by appealing to sense perception, because sense perception presupposes that there are laws of nature. So the very thing that he condemns, he's practicing. He also believes that there are fundamental laws of thought, laws of logic, which allow him to think along the lines of truth and stay out of the gutter, you will, of error. But what's his evidence that there are fundamental laws of logic? The answer is he has none.
There's evidence that, you know, the technology that we're using now works, and it's based on models where the laws of logic are a thing.
Works? So, how do you know things work? How do you know stuff just isn't happening? Well, that stuff is happening, and it may be happening with a high degree of consistency. That doesn't necessitate that there are laws, because you could have a chance universe producing that, couldn't you?
Possibly. Should we believe that?
Well, why should you believe in laws rather than chance? The point I'm trying to make is Boghossian says one thing in his book. Boghossian says one thing in his book, that faith is a faulty epistemology because it is believing in something without evidence, and yet he believes that there are laws of nature for which he doesn't have evidence to it. And appealing to sense perception is circular.
He says sense perception can't be defeated because, you know, senses just keep happening. They're just continuous defeaters. So if his sense perception was like, if that wasn't actually real, then he just keeps having senses that falsify that hypothesis. Sense
perception presupposes that there are laws. Okay, so the point is, he believes that there are fundamental, universal, absolute laws of logic. He doesn't have evidence for that. He believes that there are laws of nature. He believes in science. But what's the evidence for that? Appealing to sense perception or observation is presupposing these very laws that one would attempt to justify. So the fact of the matter is, he's committing the very faulty epistemology that he's criticizing.
I think he and I would agree that if we have better reasons to doubt those than just using those provisionally as part of our models for explaining, you know, the universe, then we'd be glad to do that. Why should we do that?
No, he believes, and he reasons from, that it is the case that nature operates according to certain uniform laws. What's his evidence for that?
It's one of the brute facts type of thing. You know, we have to use some things to make models.
Brute facts. Brute facts are mute facts. Tell me a brute fact. Tell me how you know a brute fact.
They're just parts of our models that we use to make predictions.
Models aren't brute facts. Okay, no, so you could make a prediction in the future, and the fact that your predictions consistently come true doesn't necessitate that there are laws behind it, because chance could produce the same results. Unless, of course, you want to deny that chance couldn't produce the same types of consistencies that laws could. Do you want to affirm that?
What would be so bad about chance?
Well, the point is he is violating the very principle that he's advocating in the book, that having faith or belief in something for which you don't have evidence is a faulty epistemology, yet he believes in things such as laws of nature and that there are laws of logic. Okay? I mean, so
our sense experience to kind of make sense of stuff and then kind of check each other's sense experiences to make sure we're...
Sense experience presupposes laws for its meaningfulness.
Why?
So if you... Sense experience, sense perception, presupposes that nature operates in some uniform ways for its meaningfulness.
Why?
Let's take sight, touch, sense, and smell. They all presuppose causality. For example, eyesight, that there is light traveling through space, goes through your eye, goes through a lens, hits your optic nerve, sends a signal to your brain, and then your brain processes it. Those are causal connections. That's a law. So any invocation of any invocation, no, it's an unjustified one from Peter Boghossian's atheist worldview. How does he justify that there are laws rather than chance?
I don't understand.
Well, so I'm a physicist, if that helps, you know. And, you know, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I really don't understand where you're coming from. And, you know, what you're saying is the point I'm trying to make is
He wants to segment out people who believe in God and religion as having a faulty epistemology, that they are believing things without evidence. Yet at the core of his worldview, he believes in science. Therefore, he has to believe that there are laws of nature. How does he justify? What's the evidence for that?
Okay, so the thing is, do you like to believe in things that are true, or do you want to believe in things that you cannot prove whether they are true or false? What do you want?
Oh, I would like for Peter Boghossian to actually be
No, for
consistent.
you. What do you want for you? Are you happy believing in things you cannot tell whether they are true or not? Because in science, we are not.
Can I offer a little bit of clarification?
In my worldview, yeah, I'm not even sure what your question is.
Can I offer a little bit of clarification?
Sure, Ocean.
I think that what Didi is suggesting is that there are basal assumptions in any worldview that you're not going to be able to have a justification system for. That's going to have to be internal. And when Boghossian is talking about faith systems, he's criticizing not just is criticizing some forms of internal justification specifically, rather than all forms of it. So, I exist is an internal justification that is similar to God exists because I experience him, for example. So, Didi's pointing out basically that if someone's going to be against all faith-based beliefs, which would be, something that you may not have an evidence-based justification for, including something like I exist, there's going to be some problems when differentiating which internal justifications to criticize and which ones to not.
Yeah,
Boghossian states that a belief without evidence will be a faulty epistemology. What's his evidence that all beliefs require evidence? What's his evidence for that?
I don't think he believes that. I think
he believes that if you believe something without evidence, that's a faulty epistemology. But that belief, the belief that he's articulating,
I've read his paper.
The belief that he's articulating. Right. The belief that he is articulating is that belief without evidence is faulty epistemology. So what's the evidence that belief without evidence is a faulty epistemology? What's the evidence for that belief that he's advocating? The answer is he has none.
I've read his paper on this, and I think he explains it like where some beliefs are just logically necessary, and some beliefs we can just use our sense experience.
Where would it Peter Boghossian in an atheist worldview get the idea that anything is necessary? Because invoking that something is necessary is to invoke that something is absolute. How would Peter Boghossian establish that anything is absolute?
I don't think we should care about absolute beliefs. We can just provisionally have these principles for our models, and if we have better reasons to doubt them, we can do that. But I don't.
Better according to what standard? Better doesn't mean that it's true.
Prediction, be able to predict things.
So what?
That's probably good.
I can roll a pair of dice right now and predict I'll get double sixes. Now, if I roll double sixes, does that mean that absolutely had to occur?
Oh, being able to predict it consistently.
Could I make predictions and have chance conform to that?
Yeah, there's really no way to tell if like our predictions are just.
Thank you. Good. Therefore, Boghossian doesn't have any basis for laws, does he?
No, we can use them for predicting things.
So what if you can predict things?
We can't know absolutely that everything that we've predicted is just due to chance. But
does Peter Boghossian have evidence that there are laws of nature? No, he doesn't. Does he have evidence that there are laws of logic? No. Does he have evidence that there are? What is his evidence that anything is necessary? What's the evidence for that?
What does he mean by necessary? What does he mean by necessary?
Boghossian, if he's saying that something is logically necessary, he's saying that there's some absolute rule. How would Peter Boghossian, in his worldview as an atheist, determine that anything is absolute? The answer
I don't
is
understand.
So he's violating the very principles that he's advocating in the book, and our time is up.
But I don't understand something. Is there something different about the theist Oh, he left.
Yeah.
Wow, he actually left at the end of his time, and I didn't have to boot him.
The reason why he left was because he didn't have an answer to that question.
What question was that? There was some crosstalk, so I apologize. I didn't.
Question was, how is it different on the theistic worldview?
Well, it's not, at least from the precept point of view.
I wanted to clarify something that he was actually mistaken about, because he said to you guys that sense perception required laws, right? But that's actually not true, because he was just saying that you could have all the same events on a chance universe. Do you guys remember? Do you remember him saying that you could have all the same events on a chance universe?
Mm-hmm.
Well, presumably that would include you perceiving things. So what he said about sense perception requiring laws, that was not actually true, based on what he had said, right? Because what he had said was that you could have all the same events on a chance universe. So sense perception doesn't require laws. On his view.
This all goes into the weeds very quickly, and you know.
Well, I think it was interesting that he when Reed and Darth were having that exchange, that he said, well, Boghossian's using circular reasoning, and he's presupposing the laws of logic, etc. I mean, as the kind of the de facto moderator for this, I didn't want to jump in, but I'm thinking and take over for Reed. But I'm thinking to myself, isn't that what you as a presup do? You just assert something is true because of divine revelation, and you say you don't need evidence. So if Darth doesn't need evidence, why does Boghossian or Reed or anybody else need evidence? And since when did we become beholden? Yes, I've read maybe the first chapter or two, but most of my SE experience has been watching videos like Reed and Anthony's and other channels on YouTube. I mean, I don't know if I agree necessarily with everything Boghossian says, and just because you do SE doesn't mean you have to. It's just a big red herring. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, but so we got some new people in. One of you guys want to introduce yourselves? Like Jack, want to go ahead?
I sent a message to Jack.
Okay.
Jack is a friend.
Yeah, I've been pursuing Darth Dawkins for several years now. You guys are familiar with Darwin's Greatest Hits. It's a channel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love that channel.
I don't actually have anything to do with the channel, but just in case you guys aren't familiar with,
we're fairly familiar with Darth, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that channel, I think, does a very good job of sort of showing the logical holes and the dodging and the dishonest tactics. And
I mean, it's so obvious that there's just so many psychological things going on there. You can tell, like, the phrasings of, like, has to, and it's all, like, very obvious to me, at least to me. Like, he needs this thing to give him certainty, and it's a way of having a sense of control in the world. So stuff. Well,
like and you notice Reed how quickly he pivoted from do you believe in what I'm reading into what Peter says in the containment protocols? Do you believe in that, to jumping right onto the precept script? Well,
that's because you denied agreeing with Peter Boghossian's final chapter.
Yeah.
As soon as you denied agreeing with his final chapter, he didn't want to chase that anymore because it wasn't a winning battle for him. So he wanted to see if he could catch you on, like, trip you up on not having knowledge of or epistemic knowledge.
Yeah, those goalposts were shifting so fast. I was getting vertigo there.
Yeah, we're not to the word.
I mean, frankly, if he shows up again at some of these future hangouts, I may just boot him immediately, because it's very clear he's not good in actually having a conversation. He just likes to get on here and bloviate for a while. And you notice I had to set a timer for him. And in the past, I have booted him because he would often go past that timer. I was actually shocked that he left. It could have been because of some of the new folks. Yeah.
He left because we showed up. Because he knows that we know how to take his arguments apart. Because we've had a lot of experience.
I feel sorry for you guys.
Yeah.
There was actually, speaking of the Darwin's Greatest Hits channel, there was a great video on there. I was watching some of the recent uploads, and there's one video video where name, but she was asking Darth, because Darth was essentially saying, I make my own choices, I choose my own thoughts. I thought would be a great SE question.
Yeah.
Oh, Godless Girl. Okay, I knew it was Godless something. I didn't want to get it wrong though. But she asked a great question, and I think this, with a little tweaking, could be great for discussions. Often free will comes up in SE discussions, and her question was,
"Is the A over B thing?"
Well, I don't know. If
can you think
no, it
your
was
thoughts before you think?
Yeah. If you choose your thoughts, does that mean you're thinking your thoughts before you think them? Because in order to make a decision on a thought, in other words, to say I choose my own thoughts means you have to be able to think about those thoughts so you can make a decision on which thought to think.
Right.
So, and Darth, at one point, he said, or did he admit to it? But then later, when he was called out on it, he's like, "Oh, well, I wasn't."
There's a video on Darwin's Greatest Hits about this. It was actually it's actually the most recent one
that's what I'm talking,
where he says yes,
about.
But then he tries to say later that he was saying it sarcastically. But if you listen to the original video, it's not sarcastic at all.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and now that was the video I was referring to. I just thought that question made me really ponder, because I've often had some SE exchanges about free will and do we have free will and all that, and I thought that was such a powerful yet simple question. Is if you choose your thoughts, then does that mean you think your thoughts before you think them? And that just struck me as a profound question, and I thought that I'm trying to bring the Hangout back to SC, and I apologize that Darth ate up so much of the time there, but we kept it much more limited than last time.
No
So I see we had had somebody new join, Dan the Man, or the Man, Dan.
Hey there. How are you guys?
How's it going, Dan? Good.
Good.
Pretty good.
Just
so
you guys were talking, so joined in.
So do we have does anybody want, or go ahead, CJ?
Yeah, well, I was thinking maybe we can extract some value from DD joining us here, and actually circle back to SE. Maybe we could brainstorm how applicable SE is in this situation, and maybe change up SE a little to basically to deal with something like this, because it got into the argument. Seemed to me that Reed was basically entertaining him for those 10 minutes, and there was no SE there. So maybe my question would be, how could SE still help in a situation like this?
Now, to clarify, CJ, are you talking about like with presuppositionalism in general, or just using the specific Darth example?
I don't think that SE works very well against presuppositionalism. It's not going to get you out of the loop.
Yeah, I think the key to having a productive SE exchange is having honesty and rapport, or especially honesty. And somebody like Darth may not be a great example. I mean, I have had some conversations with presups, but it tends to get very frustrating because they're not open to examining whether their belief is true. Like their worldview has to assume that their belief is true first. And I think Ocean makes a great point there. That's a tricky nut to crack. I think
the process is that they have they're trying to justify logic through God, and they're holding the position that if you're not going to be using God in order to justify logic, there's no reason to have a conversation, because they don't believe that the conversation has any meaning at that point. Now, there's no justification for anything that they just said there, but that's going to be what they're going to hold to. And as long as they're holding to that, you're not going to get anywhere with SE, because you're going to have to, like, in order to have any sort of conversation based in logic with a presupper, you're going to have to agree that their God exists first. Like, if you're going to have somebody who's like married to presup, you're going to have to, if you want to have an SE conversation with them, you're going to have to get them out of that presup circle first somehow.
Yeah, I completely understand. So one value I get out of SE is something that might actually be helpful here, and that is to basically avoid the bullshit, avoid the shields people put up. And it seems to me very much that presuppositionalism is a shield. I'm not convinced that any presup actually holds their position because of the presup argument. It's just a shield. It's just something to keep, just something to protect the actual reasons for belief. So I guess you would have to be a bit more strict and forceful than you would want. But I would just think.
Some of them justify it with the tag argument.
Okay, yeah, sure. But I would think that the SE question would be, well, if you became convinced that this argument didn't hold, how would it affect your belief? Would it not affect your belief? Okay, we're not talking about it then. Done. And if they switch, interrupt them, stop, no, answer the question first. We're not moving past anything before you answer that question. It's not cordial, admit it. But either we're talking about the stuff that matters or we're not talking.
I think the presup would ask you how you find that question intelligible without believing in God.
Yeah, they're going to gaslight you and basically say that you're nothing but brain fizz and go out of the side 10 Bruggencate kind of playbook there.
Yeah. So then the question is, okay, you don't want to have this conversation? That's fine. We're not talking anymore. No problem.
Now, I do think I've seen a couple interesting approaches. In one of our previous community hangouts, Doug Leckman from the Pine Creek YouTube channel was on, and he actually had an interesting way of interacting with Darth by basically asking him, "Okay, help me think like you do. How do I stop rebelling? You know, how do I begin to accept Jesus and start thinking like you do?" And it was amazing how resistant Darth was to that line of questioning, because it kind of broke the script there a little bit. It took a while, but eventually it did break the loop there. But I think
Doug also has a really good breakdown of that conversation where he watches it and comments about his own answers really well. I really like that conversation. And there's also some parts of that conversation that made it onto the Darwin's Greatest Hits channel.
Yeah, made it to the DGH video. I think also Ocean and others, have you guys heard the Ferrari thought experiment that's been used in SE lately?
I have. I've had it used on me.
I'm
a polytheist, so
okay. I wonder how. I wonder if that might be helpful in kind of, at least, if not cracking the precept code, if the Ferrari or Lamborghini thought experiment might be helpful to at least get people watching a video or get observers, maybe somehow trigger the precept to think, okay,
it's not going to work on them.
Oh, so because I was thinking that's helpful. That thought experiment is helpful in saying, oh, well, I do require stringent standards of evidence for extraordinary claims unless it's my extraordinary claim.
Now, what's going to happen there is that, because the Ferrari example is one of my problems with the Ferrari example, actually, is that the Ferrari example only deals with empiricism. And there's two kind of responses to it that I think would take place when dealing with a presupper. First, the presupper is going to ask how you think that question or that line of reasoning is intelligible without God, like I said earlier. They're going to use that with any question that requires logical function. The other thing that they would do is, and a lot of other Christians that are not presuppers or even theists will do that, and I do this as well, is to call the Ferrari example a category error, because belief in God is not an empirical claim. It's a fundamentally different kind of claim. So when you're making the Ferrari approach, it's like, okay, well, we're talking about, the empirical claim of somebody owning a car, and what kind of, and it's even an appeal to state systems about how you can verify ownership. With respect to God, you don't have those systems. So, and you don't have, it's not something you could produce empirical evidence. I've often asked about what empirical evidence could be produced for a God. And seems to be a very difficult question to answer.
I have
like as
talked
an
about
SE here, what would
before.
you accept, for example? But that gets complicated really quick. Sorry for talking over you, Dan.
Sure. I was just going to say, Darth's actually in a Discord chat that I'm a part of, and so I've talked with him a little bit before. Unfortunately, it's in a Discord chat with a lot of other people, so it stops being a one-on-one dialogue really quickly because everybody wants to kind of chime in. And I think that's one thing.
Out of curiosity, are you talking about Krillism, or are you talking about
Krillism?
Krillism, okay.
And so I've seen him there, and that's kind of hard when there's a bunch of people talking at once. So I've never had a good one-on-one conversation with him. I think the only other time I've talked to another precept is Chris Williams, and I did that on Pine Creek's channel, and he's a precept Calvinist. And it's kind of hard because the belief system is so consistent, internally speaking. It's kind of the same way of the thought experiment of last Thursdayism. You know, if you believe the earth was created last Thursday and all of your every evidence you had before that was just created after the fact, then, you know, it doesn't really go anywhere. But the only way that really shaves that off is just Occam's razor. You know, what is more pragmatic to consider as being true, you know, what is easier to believe. And so one thing I've kind of thought about is, well, if me as a separate person doesn't believe that God gives me logic, how do I come to that belief in the first place? You know, how do I even get there as a starting point? And I haven't really, I mean, that's kind of a rough draft of a question I might ask, but kind of something along those lines of how do I even start at the same base, because, you know, the precept is starting at a completely different, well, presupposition than I am. So, like, how do you even get there unless...
That's the route that Doug took, and I like that approach really well, which is to say to the presuppositionalist, kind of convince me to get into the position that you're in, because I don't know how you're getting there. And that they wind up, that puts them in a situation where they either have to try and justify it or rely on just blindly asserting it. And that's something that I guess you could use as an SEer to talk to somebody who's a presupper, to say, like, you know, help me get to where you are. And again, Doug was really good at this. Help me get to where we are. How did you get to this position?
Yeah, and also implicit in any really conversation is, especially with religious conversations, it's, you know, in-group versus out-group, believer versus atheist. The atheist is, you know, not my in-group, and they're bad, you know, people. At least that's what a lot of people think. And just being able to just listen for a lot, just being the kind of person who is different from the stereotype of the out-group, would just help a lot. So probably if I had to talk with Darth one-on-one, I would do a lot of listening, never really coming off as an aggressive.
You don't come off very aggressive
person
generally, I think.
Yeah, it takes a lot for that, for sure.
I've seen as far as the in-group out-group thing, precepts are interesting because they'll go they'll eat their own, so to speak. Really. I've seen them go after Christians harder than atheists. Like that in-group out-group is presuppositionalist, not presuppositionalist. As far as the out-group is just not presuppositionalist rather than atheist.
Interesting.
They'll go after believers for any sort of justification system that they have that isn't presuppositionalism. So if they if they believe in, like, the ontological argument, for example, they'll go after it and say, well, how do you know, how is that argument intelligible with, you know, the same question I was saying that they would reference to pretty much anything.
Well, and I think also something to keep in mind with precepts is, and again, I can't take credit for this. I saw the clip referenced on one of the Darwin's Greatest Hits videos. But there was a clip of, I think it was Psi 10 Bruggencate, who was giving a lecture in a church, and he said that the job of the precept apologist is not to change minds, but to basically get the atheist to shut up. And at that point, that's where I've kind of, you know, not stopped dialoguing with them, because they're not really interested in having a conversation. They just want to get you to shut up and let them pontificate and preach at you. And so I'm here. Go ahead.
No, so just one observation. Doesn't that show that it's not actually, the argument isn't actually important for their belief? It's just a sword and a shield.
Well, they'll say that. They'll say that the argument, they didn't believe because of the arguments. They'll say that we believe because of divine revelation, and that the world wouldn't make sense without this divine revelation being true. And essentially, it's a big old shifting of the burden of proof. Like, this has to be true for me to make sense of the world until you can demonstrate otherwise. And I would say, no, please demonstrate to me why I should believe what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in a sense, in my own Christian beliefs, I kind of thought that way about my conclusions of God. It was like God was kind of the baseline for me in which the world made sense. And so you had to demonstrate a world without God and how that would make sense. And I also had a misunderstanding of what atheism really was. I really thought it was the knowledge that God doesn't exist. I didn't understand it as the lack of a belief in God until evidence has shown otherwise. You know, I didn't understand the provisional nature of the belief rather than you know, being a black and white thing, because that was the way I was raised of thinking. You know, there was a God or there wasn't, and had to be this or that. And so the kind of subtlety of that can be lost on some people if you don't have that understanding of beliefs. You know?
I actually take a little bit of issue with that, but that would probably be another conversation that would take much longer. But I think that what you described as far as lack of belief actually fits more into an agnostic position. And that atheism, I think, would be still kind of a rejection, because there's usually a justification for the claim when it comes to atheism, where they have arguments against whatever God that they're objecting to.
Sure. And I do classify, like, at least my atheism as a rejection of religious beliefs. And I can definitely say I'm Gnostic about the claims of, like, the Christian God, for example, you know. But without that starting point of you know, viewing the subtleties in the differences of that belief, I think that I had trouble understanding that. You can even see what in my video when I was talking to Anthony for the first time, I was like, well, what do you believe? Like, what is it? You know, how do you even get to your conclusions without God? You know, I didn't understand. So,
Dan, it was interesting for me that you used the word provisional, because that was a word I had in my mind when listening to DD's arguments, where he basically gives examples of what he thinks are presuppositions, and I'm just thinking to myself, no, that's a provisional conclusion.
Right.
When he basically he says that atheists have these and these presuppositions, and I'm like naturalism and evidence and the senses make like your senses. I'm just like, no, that's a provisional conclusion.
Yes. So I recently finished reading I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, because I got to see Dr. Frank Turk here at Baylor.
Sorry.
And he talks about that, and Josh McDowell talks about this too in Evidence That Demands a Verdict. They claim that atheists have a anti-supernatural bias, right? Which we would just call, you know, naturalism. But it's not that we don't suppose that there could be supernatural beliefs. It's just that we haven't seen evidence that makes us believe that there should be, you know, if we can find a natural explanation for them. You know, a supernatural belief is unnecessary. But if you know, it's a word game, right? If you approach it as it's an anti-supernatural bias, then suddenly you're the one that's closed off, and you're not open to, you know, a new interpretation of evidence. So,
well, it's all about shifting the focus of the burden of proof, though. In that instance,
yeah, that's part of it too.
Go ahead, Ocean. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I was just asking if I could object to it. I'm happy to let other people talk. The objection that I would make to that is that I think that when you're using empiricism, you're using a system that is built for naturalism. It causes you to conclude naturalism, or not necessarily conclude naturalism, but the only evidence that allows you to observe is naturalist. If you're going to suppose an experiment around something that is supernatural, then I don't think that empiricism would be the method that you would use necessarily, because you're not really observing something that's part of naturalism. You're trying to observe something that's outside of naturalism, or is could be in fact unobservable from the tools that we have access to. In some conversations, I've supposed a godoscope as an experimental tool to say that, you know, imagine a telescope of some kind in which we could observe the goings-ons of gods. You would then be able to figure out how they work, build an ontology around them, and they would then become part of naturalism because they would then be subject to empiricism. But as of where it stands, that's not where we are. So the conversation changes fundamentally from that perspective. It's when asking for evidence of a God that is empirical, you're committing kind of a category problem, I think.
Sure, but you know, if we don't have a system that allows us to recognize what is supernatural and what is not, then you know, I don't see where we could go as human beings, you know. So it seems like naturalism has a higher predictive power, and you know,
because you can observe things,
right?
It's just better, obviously.
You know, but maybe I'm presupposing naturalism. I don't know.
I mean, I think that you are, but you know, that's I don't think that's
what else can I do?
Problem. It's unless you're trying to say that something about religious beliefs because they don't stand up to empiricism. Well, of course they wouldn't stand up to empiricism. I think that fits with the claims that religious people are making. If they did stand up to empiricism, then they would be fundamentally different claims. They would then become scientific claims rather than claims around spirituality or some kind of supernaturalism, I guess.
Yeah, which is interesting because it seems that ancient Christians, at least from the Gospels, seem to have a much more consistent hit rate for their beliefs, you know, as far as the believers are supposedly endowed with abilities to heal people and to do all sorts of miraculous things. So, and we just don't see that today. So, you know, maybe there was
healers, I guess, but
yeah, right. But you know, either something else was going on back then, or people were being deceived, or the stories were just not accurate from the beginning. I don't know, but you only hear Christians today that will say, "Well, it can't be examined by, you know, empiricism," which is very weird because there's tons of stories in the Bible that it seemed like people would be able to observe it, but you know, it just doesn't happen anymore. So, what can you do?
Well, Ocean, would you be open to answering some questions about these you know, these claims that you can't observe or you can't produce evidence for a god or gods? I know you mentioned earlier that you were polytheist.
Produce empirical evidence, yeah. As one of the a response that I was thinking about with that is that if you look at what the early church fathers, the arguments that they were making, they were usually producing philosophical evidence rather than empirical evidence. Thomas Aquinas, for example.
Right. Yeah, it was more like, I don't want to say arguing God into existence, but trying to demonstrate God's existence through a logical argument.
Right.
Maybe like demonstrating the impossibility of the contrary or something like that.
Yeah, you might try and if you can demonstrate the impossibility of the contrary, then I don't think anybody has. But if you could do that, then that would be evidence for God. I think that any philosophical argument for God is going to could be considered evidence for God. It's just whether or not you find that evidence convincing, or not. I think that, you know, as an atheist, one of the burdens you might have if you're going to go about the route of rejecting, especially Christianity, you would want to examine some of those philosophical arguments and have responses for those philosophical arguments. Like I do as a polytheist. Yeah, I looked at them and had responses for them, but
well, I guess my question then would be, how do you, and I guess this is a similar question I have when I'm talking to somebody who's a deist. I don't necessarily talk to polytheists that much, but if I may ask, how do we, I guess that's a better way of putting it, how do we tell the difference between a God who is undetectable and a God who doesn't exist?
Oh, I don't think you would be able to.
So why would you make the assumption that a God or gods exist then? And again, I'm not trying to be condescending here. I'm just trying to understand.
The route that I use has to do with spiritual experiences as an aggregate, where you have people around the world having spiritual experiences, and I don't dismiss them. And also, I think that you need to have a good reason to say that they are something other than what they are, and before you're going to be saying that they are something other than what they're claimed as.
Right.
So I'm basically taking the aggregate of experiences at face value and moving forward with that, and using that as evidence. And beyond that, checking it with philosophical arguments beyond that to suggest that there might be multiple gods rather than just one. Because you can make a conclusion with many people having spiritual experiences on one God. Christians use one explanation or another. But the polytheist would then just agree that there's multiple gods.
Is there any experiment that you could run to lower your confidence that those experiences in aggregate are due to like a god or gods?
If all the people having experiences were mentally ill, for example, I think that would lower my confidence. But I don't think that's the case.
Okay, so that's like a hypothetical experiment.
Right, that would be like a hypothetical. Yeah, if you wanted to falsify it and say they're all illusions of some kind, for example, then if everybody that was having spiritual experiences were mentally ill, then that would be the expectation, that they're all hallucinations of some kind.
Would they have to be mentally ill? Yeah. It seems like that could be. It seems like that could just be perfectly natural experiences that humans do sometimes. You don't have to be mentally ill to have those experiences. Right.
I agree with that, but that's if you're saying you don't have to be mentally ill in order to have those experiences, then are you opting not to trust them, or you opt to trust them? Or
I'm just saying, like, we have ways of inducing them without people being mentally ill, and at least in the way that I think of mentally ill.
Sure, I think
yeah.
we might have that definition.
Jonathan Haidt talks a lot about the hive switch. You can go ahead, Dan.
If I may, yeah. The latter days of my Christianity, I identified myself as a Christian mystic. And what I told people was, well, I don't have any sure evidence of God. I don't have any objective empirical evidence that I could show you, but I do have experiences of God. And that's kind of how I live through my faith. So it kind of sounds similar to yours in a sense, to where I attributed personal experiences as valuable and as evidence for my beliefs. Personally, what I think got me out of that was a greater understanding of, I think, neuroscience in general, but a lot of other kinds of science that seem to give me sufficient naturalist explanations for why I experienced the things that I did, without the need for anything supernatural, without even presupposing that there was a God or any kind of force like it. And once I understood, okay, well, we definitely know for sure that there are naturalistic forces in the world that can explain things, but we can't say for sure, the specifics of any kind of supernatural. It seemed to make more sense to me to just trust the natural. Now, again, I could be wrong. Like we talked about earlier, I have no way of evaluating supernatural claims without appealing to empiricism. But on a rationalist level, it seemed to make more sense to just appeal to that sense of naturalism rather than to make extra claims about descriptions of a supernatural being that I seem to not be able to explain in explicit terms, especially since my belief was a Christian God. And so I had all this extra baggage of what the Bible said and what other people said about my God that I couldn't necessarily account for.
I have a lot of extra baggage too, but it's a different kind of baggage. You might say that there's more bags with the same amount of baggage. But as far as I already explained why the empiricism method doesn't necessarily convince me out of it, because I think it's a category problem. But as far as neuroscience and other things, it's just because that you could say that some of these experiences are the tickling of some part of the brain that maybe God tickles or something like that. tickle is a weird verb to use there, but you get my meaning.
If we had like a pill, like the God experience pill,
mm-hmm.
and you could just take it voluntarily and have like whatever, the equivalent of experiences that you've had in the past, would that
right? I think that you're going along the lines of what I'm about to address. That is, just because you can have something artificially create that experience doesn't mean that when the experience happens without that artificial stimuli.
Totally, yeah. We couldn't know for sure
right.
if there wasn't actually a God doing that. It would just.
I don't think that falsifies is what I'm saying, and so
not completely, no.
Right. I think that it shows that you could have other explanations, but it doesn't falsify.
Yeah, I would say those are like reasons to doubt. At least
sure.
For me,
yeah, I could definitely see that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not holding that. This is an absolute knowledge claim as far as like I can demonstrate it to you. Obviously, since I hold that empiricism is not a good method for it, it's something that either you agree with or you don't. And experiences that I've had, experiences that other people have had that I know, have caused me to agree with it.
Yeah, and something that would raise my confidence about it being a God causal experience is like if some particular sect of religious people had certain actions you could do, and like only those actions produce those experiences, and nothing else really did. That might be interesting. That could be something that would raise my confidence.
Oh, I mean, as a polytheist, I would believe that
mm-hmm.
multiple religions can get you to those experiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, I know we originally scheduled this hangout to end about 13 minutes ago. I mean, I'm okay if we're going a little longer, since it seems like we're going into an interesting topic here, because we don't get polytheist interlocutors too often. But I don't know what everybody else's schedule looks like. I don't mind going over a little longer if you guys don't.
I'm free to stick around for a little bit if you guys are.
I'm the same, but is there
so just out of curiosity,
I don't know how long you want to stick around. I think that's part of what Reed's asking is like, do we want to sit here for 6 hours talking about?
Well, no, I was thinking
go to Logan with it if you want to.
No, I was thinking in maybe another 10 or 15 minutes because I've got to take care of some things around the house.
Okay.
But Ocean, just out of curiosity, so you identify as a polytheist, and is there a particular pantheon of gods that you adhere to, or is it more of all these different pantheons like Norse, Egyptian, Greek, or what? I mean, I'm just throwing examples out there.
Sure. I hold to the Germanic. That's the sect of the church I belong to, which would be Thor, Odin.
Okay, so Thor, Odin, Loki, all that. Okay.
Loki is kind of looked down upon, but there's a lot of perceptions on Loki as far as what he represents, but that gets into like a very complicated
it's the Marvel Comics pantheon.
Of course, God damn it, Chad.
Well, that's why I said Loki. I know a little bit about Norse mythology, like Ragnarok and Asgard, that sort of thing, but I'm not very well versed on most of what I know. I did glean from Marvel Comics, so I'm just putting that disclaimer out there. So does Thor really have those washboard abs, or is that just our idealization of
Absolutely.
Thor? Okay.
Yeah.
So could Thor forge a Mjolnir that's so heavy he couldn't throw it?
He didn't forge it.
That's just a BS question. Yeah, I forget who made it, but
it was made by the account is that there's a set of dwarves that made it, which would be another kind of supernatural entity. And they explain to him how it works, and they give it to him. It's conceivable that they could. Well, I mean, as far as like the philosophical question regarding Thor being able to have something that he can't pick up, the answer to that would just be a yes, because he's a finite god. There's not a claim around Thor like Christians do with omnipotence around that. There's Odin, or Odin is the wisest of gods, but he is not omnipotent or omniscient. That's the word. And then there's Thor, which may be the strongest of gods, but he is not. He's not even the strongest supernatural being according to the myths, and so obviously he's not omnipotent.
So you said earlier that you hold to this belief system, or I guess the belief of these gods, due to an aggregate of personal experiences. Is that correct? Am I misstating your position?
Yeah. So I want to explain a little bit about that because I also adhere to the Germanic pantheon. There's a lot of specific titles that go into my polytheism that I'll explain for a second. I'm a syncretic druid, heathen polytheist, or reconstructionist on top of that. So the reconstructionist is that I'm using historical evidence. The druid and heathen are the different pantheons that I mainly subscribe to, which would be the Celtic and the Germanic. I'm also inspired by cultus decorum, or cultus deorum rather, which is the Roman pantheon. And then the syncretic is the position that's more relevant, which is that that I hold to more than one pantheon, and that more than one pantheon can exist, even those inside of my beliefs as well as those outside of my practices. So there's certain gods that have historical practices that I'm willing to engage in the practices of due to my experience and the experience of others that I trust. And then there's the idea that I'm not really going to deny the existence of other god concepts that might be coherent.
Okay. So yeah, it is fascinating. So did you would it be fair to say that these experiences led you to the belief in Thor and these other gods? Or
yeah, that would be fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was it something you were raised in, or is this something?
No,
you came
I was a convert.
Okay.
Happened in college while I was traveling a lot. But the conversion did. It's a series of experiences, but the actual all right, I guess I'm pagan now is while I was in Scotland. There were some experiences that took place while I was traveling in Ireland in some very Celtic holy sites. But I brushed them off as a Christian. I converted to Celtic Christianity at the time. Then I was in Scotland and some other incidences took place. Visited a place called Castle Rig, which there was a feeling of overwhelming presence. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I should explore this more. And eventually converted to Celtic polytheism. And that journey has led me into Germanic polytheism.
Can I ask a very specific question? Did you find that your experiences gave you any new information about the world that you previously didn't know? I understand that it gives you a sense of feelings, but is there any knowledge or information that maybe you
sort of
from your experiences?
I'd say I was having a conversation with another friend of mine who's pagan, and his position was that he has a lot of respect for science that gives you information about the world, and then a lot of respect for spirituality and the gods, which give you information about yourself. If that makes sense. That's
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, well, thanks for answering that. I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around, and forgive me if we kind of keep restating the same question over and over, but so you go to this Germanic holy site or Celtic holy site. I can't remember what you said, so forgive me if I'm misquoting you. So you go to this holy site or this landmark, and you have this profound feeling or experience. What method did you use to determine that the source of that experience was Thor and these other gods?
I looked for similar experiences in history. I was a history major, so I'm pretty good at research. So I was looking for what other people in that area might have experienced, what they describe it as, what other modern practitioners describe as well. And I found that, I think that when Christians have experiences, they're legitimately experiencing something, because they all describe a similar experience. They all describe, this entity that they're dealing with, and that there's similar functions things that they do in order to get to those experiences. And pagans are not different from that. I think that there's a variety of experiences that exceed Christianity that they have.
Okay.
So, and they were similar in description to what I was experiencing, as well as plus a little extra, I guess. You know what I mean? So, that's when I started kind of going into it more and saying, let's explore this. I think that there's something of value here to experiment with in whatever ways that I can.
So why do you think it is that when people such as myself, that also claim to have very real experiences, still come to separate conclusions about what God is or what gods there are? Because for me, my experiences still confirmed a belief in Christianity. They didn't point me towards any other kind of pantheon. Do you think that's a result of my culture, of my upbringing, or do you think that my experiences weren't as legitimate, or what do you think that might be?
I think that you could have the same experiences I have and come to the conclusion of being an atheist because you explain the experiences differently or you agree with a different argument. Like, I think that atheism is a respectable position. Like, there's obviously a lot of great thinkers that were atheists or are atheists. So
if the experiences can lead you to Christianity, polytheism, or atheism, how could is that experience a reliable way to come to these types of beliefs?
What do you mean by reliable?
In order for us to keep them, so they lead to a position.
I think it can lead you to a position. I don't think that it can it can lead you to only one position.
But can it lead us to true positions, though?
It depends on whether or not the position is true. I think it's begging the question.
How can we know that these? Because my experiences brought me to Christianity, and your belief system doesn't recognize that as being true. So,
no, I think that Christians are experiencing a God that of some kind. I don't think that it's the one that they describe necessarily with all the properties that because what is there about the Christian experience that says that the entity that that's responding to them during prayer or whatever is omnipotent? I don't think there is one.
Sure, but as you said, when you looked up history of your faith or of the faith of the people who've had these experiences, they came to their conclusions based on other people's experiences, and so I came to mine based on other Christians' experiences, and so it seems to kind of be this, it keeps going back and back on the reliance of other people's experiences without even trusting our own experiences as being true or genuine or leading us to any sort of truth.
So here's an example. If I think that as a Christian, if you have some experiences that back up your Christianity, you can come to the conclusion that your God is real. I don't know how a Christian can have experiences that can lead them to the conclusion that my God is false, which I would hold about Christians. I think that they're having experiences and maybe their God is true. It's just that it wouldn't be because of other experiences. It would not be the God as far as a coherence is concerned. It couldn't be the only one.
It seems like it's unfalsifiable. What would falsify it?
I think polytheism, but it's ultimately unfalsifiable when it comes to empiricism. I think that again, with that category problem, which is the reason why I think that it's reasonable to come to multiple conclusions.
Is there such a thing as a falsifiable philosophical position, or is it just applied to empiricism?
Yeah, you could point out inconsistencies with an argument.
Yeah, I guess.
Like if I have a logical argument that says that, I have a blue shirt, therefore all shirts are blue. That's a logical argument, but it's not a true logical argument, right?
So that just comes down to just the fallacies.
Right. Yeah, you could point out a fallacy, you could point out an inconsistency in order to like the way that you would falsify the logical argument of the shirt thing is you could produce a red shirt, or you could produce an argument that says that there's nothing about shirtness that implies blueness.
Is it possible to have a philosophical argument that proves something that's not really true?
Yeah. It's like polytheism could be wrong, obviously. It's just because it's philosophically consistent doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that, it's reasonable.
And what's like the best way to tell if we're mistaken about it?
I don't know. Well, you would be able to, if you can come up with an inconsistency or an incoherence with it, then yeah, that would be the way to combat it. I haven't come across, like with Christianity, there's a lot of things like the problem of evil or the Euthyphro dilemma, problem of divine hiddenness. I don't see arguments like that being made against polytheism, and it could be that it hasn't really been examined seriously by philosophers. There's a couple of philosophers that have been putting it out there as an argument, with Stephen Dillon's book Case for Polytheism or John Michael Greer's A World Full of Gods. But they deal with some of the arguments against Christianity and how they don't apply to polytheism, or that polytheism kind of gets out from under them.
I'm kind of curious how divine hiddenism wouldn't apply to polytheism.
Divine hiddenness assumes a God that is wholly good and wants to have a relationship with you. And if an all-powerful being that is wholly good wants to have a relationship with you, why can't he? Like, surely the intention would be enough with an all-powerful God.
Right. A dick God that hides from us,
Yeah, okay, right. I see. So
with polytheism, you're not dealing with something that is wholly good. You're not even dealing with something that's wholly powerful or all-powerful. So that doesn't apply.
Okay, cool.
Which goes back to unfalsifiability.
It's just, we're dealing with what the claim is. And I think it is ultimately unfalsifiable from an empirical standpoint. But you could, if you can come up with any philosophical argument, you can try to point out inconsistencies. But I don't think that, and just because it doesn't have inconsistencies doesn't mean that it's true. Again, I want to stress that I'm not saying that because it's got a philosophical coherence to it, that it is therefore true. I'm just saying I agree with it.
Yeah, I kind of think in terms of models, and falsifiability is just one part of it. Like predictability is another part. Is there any predictions this model of polytheism has besides just experiences? Is there anything specific to that model that you? I
think there may be personal. This gets into, the empiricism tells you about the world, or naturalism tells you about the world, and then whatever spiritualism tells you about yourself. That if you follow the advice of the gods, or if you kind of devote yourself to the practice, that there's benefits of that. And in my life, I think that there have been benefits of that, of actually following the religion. My life has benefited from it, financially as well as spiritually. I've benefited. So, and I attempt to give back to the community. There's also a very communal aspect about the religion that is to, take care of others that are part of it.
Yeah. Are you part of like a
church? Yeah.
Community? How many people are like in this thing?
About 300.
300. Are they all located in your area, or is it just an online?
Yeah, that's Atlanta.
Atlanta. Where do you live? Is that the same place?
I'm in Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay. So there's 300 polytheists in Atlanta?
With our particular group. There's other groups, but with our particular group, there's about 300.
I went to Georgia Tech for a couple years, so I'm familiar with Atlanta.
Okay.
So if I told you that my experiences in my Christian belief also brought me great benefits similar to yours, a sense of community and a sense of giving back and lots of other things, would that do anything for you to tell you about the truth of my claim? Or
you were asking about predictions, so I don't think that that's enough to say that it's true. Like it's, for example, there's a lot of people, it's not a majority by any means, but I'd say that of the 300, maybe about 10 or 20 of the people that are part of this group are actually atheists, that they find value in the practice from an archetypal standpoint, and that's enough for them. They participate in ritual and in the community as a kind of a therapeutic practice, and that works enough for them. And if that's how that manifests for you, then fine. You know, it's not a problem for me either way. Personally, I'm more of a theistic brand. I think most of us are. But there's exceptions.
Because that kind of just gives it more power or justification for the benefits? Having them actually be real?
Oh, no. For me, it's because I agree with arguments about it. Like the ones that I was making earlier about aggregate experience. And yeah, there's other arguments that are mentioned specifically. If anybody's interested in this, pick up the book A World Full of Gods by John Michael Greer. I'll plug him. He's a druid that wrote a book about polytheism from a philosophical standpoint. And he addresses arguments from Christianity, arguments from atheism, and then goes into the historical grounding and a number of other things about polytheism. He divides it into like 7 or 8 chapters. For example, one chapter deals with justification, another chapter deals with addressing atheist arguments or addressing Christian arguments, and moves forward from there.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you being willing to share that and answer some questions, because it's a rare. We don't get an opportunity to talk to a polytheist, let alone one who believes in the Norse or Germanic gods that often. So that's I'm actually kind of surprised there's that large of a community in Atlanta.
Yeah, we're in the Bible Belt, man.
Yeah, I was about to. Well, Atlanta's kind of an oasis in the Bible Belt.
Fun story about that. I mean, Atlanta, yes, it is. But I grew up in well, I don't want to mention where exactly I grew up, but I grew up in North Georgia, like deep Hickville Bible Belt, like
like up there by Athens or somewhere.
North of that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
think
right
mountains, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's where I grew up. I was surrounded by Christians. I was a Christian for a while, and then my conversion took place in that environment. And there was a guy, there's a small business owner up there that I bumped into several times while I was, we call ourselves heathens. And I didn't, I hung out in his store and had a lot of conversations with him and everything. And then I bumped into him at the group that we've been forming in Atlanta. And I was just like, oh my God, it's you. What are you doing here? He says, I've been heathen for 25 years. Like, we had met each other, shook hands, and hung out with each other as heathens in the same environment, and didn't say anything to each other about it because we were both in the Bible Belt, in an environment where if you talk about that kind of thing, you get certain kinds of reactions. So that was an amazing experience of just bumping into, like, oh, wait, we were both hiding in the same place and knew each other really well, but this never came up. It was a really neat kind of thing. So the size of the community surprises me less and less, because it seems like heathens just grow out of the ground. There's people have that conversion experience, and then they practice alone sometimes for years before they even seek a group. And then sometimes the groups have kind of a weird dynamic to them, but
sounds like you get a really great sense of belonging from this community.
Oh yeah, I do, and it's something that I've only started taking part in the community aspect of it for about a year, so I'm still pretty excited about it, and I've helped start it. But I've been heathen for 10 years, so that's gives you kind of an idea of like how long I was before I didn't even start looking for a group until about 2 years ago.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Reed, unless you had anything you wanted to plug or add or ask, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We went a little over half an hour past what I planned to, but had some good conversations. Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. like I said, we rarely, I think this is the first time I've actually talked to a Norse or Germanic polytheist. Most polytheists that we run into tend to be Hindu and believe in those gods. So it's interesting that you'd run into somebody who believes in the Thor and Odin and all them. So I appreciate you sharing that and letting us ask you a few questions. Reed, did you have anything you wanted to plug? I think everybody else dropped already.
Just next Thursday, we're doing another episode of Epistemic. Anthony, I think today just had a big talk in Norway talking about that.
Yeah, he went to Oslo, right?
Yeah, so he should have some stories from then, and yeah, tune in next Thursday.
Well, if I could get somebody to hook me up with a star metal hammer, that would be awesome. But I don't have the money for the meteorite iron to forge such a mighty weapon.
I know a few blacksmiths.
Okay. I just know, yeah, I actually have a cousin's husband who's a blacksmith. But meteorite iron is quite expensive, so I haven't had a chance to get him to make any epic hammers or blades for me. I'm just geeking out a little bit here. All right, Dan, I see you rejoined. I think we're about to stop broadcasting and wrap it up. Did you have anything you wanted to plug or talk about?
That's what I was afraid of. No, I plan on joining the Epistemic podcast again. I still do. I didn't come last time because it was just a fluke. I really want to come back. I really miss it. I've been involved a lot in my local Secular Student Alliance community here and doing some stuff there. And so that's really fun. I don't really have anything to plug right now, just kind of hanging out just here. So yeah, thanks again, Ocean, for answering my questions and being open to that. I really appreciate that.
And I'm often in Krillism if you want to find me there.
Yeah, cool. I'm usually in the background and I listen to people. Yeah, so some of the people are I know in real life are in that group, and they kind of got me in there. And so that's when I first heard about Darth Dawkins and stuff. So it's very interesting. But yeah,
after we go off air, we can like exchange usernames and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, that's it for me.
See you guys later.
All right, take care. Thanks everybody for joining and watching. Have a good day.